Paul Giamatti plays Paul Hunman, who's this kind of
a teacher, very sophisticated to the point where he has to show off his intelligence.
Is he though? I mean, he
unlike
is
somebody that has a law degree and a PhD,
he is
and would bring that up.
He that's Michael Smith Esquire, folks. Crowbar that in anytime you can. Welcome to the Yo Brother Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, as always, my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith.
How you doing, Dan?
Hey, man. Good. We're back. We're going to do a review on a movie that came out in October, actually. It's The Holdovers. The Holdovers, starring Paul Giamatti. And this came out October 27, 2023. Yeah, it was interesting because a couple of our loyal viewers, Paul and such, that were, clamoring for an awards episode.
Right.
And if you've been listening or watching the show for any length of time, you know that ship has sailed. We're pretty much not going to do that anymore, I don't think.
But we always have to mention when we're doing a movie that's won some award.
Yeah, and this recording is coming right off the heels of the Grammy Awards. And it was just one more reminder of how done I am with award shows.
I did not even flip it on.
Yeah,
that's how done I am.
Right. So anyways, I don't want to get on that rabbit hole.
Right.
So this was one where, I just kind of out of the blue said to you, hey, do you want to talk about the Holdovers?
And I was all in.
Yeah, you were all in. And the reason I brought it up is because, as I said to you, it's on Peacock.
It was free.
It's streaming on Peacock. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that definitely influences me.
Sure.
So
we can relax and watch it without popcorn crunching and hot dog slurping and pizza chewing and
yeah. Well, now, yeah, provided mom's not around. Is that right? So it's streaming on Peacock for free, which kind of surprised me. I was like, oh, yeah, I figured it was going to be that where you pull it up and it's like, okay, buy for this and rent for that. But I'm already paying for Peacock.
I had told you a while ago I was interested in this movie.
Yeah, and
I thought it came out later than October. For some reason, the marketing has gone away for movies. And this one didn't get much press until the award show.
I was hard-pressed to find specific information on the budget. It's clearly a low budget. This is an independent film, more or less. Right. Put out by Focus Pictures, right? Is it Focus Features?
Focus Features, yeah.
Yeah, and there was like a $30 million deal that went down for them to acquire the rights to this, as far as I understand it. But I couldn't really find a lot of details beyond that. It's made about what, 35 million and change,
somewhere around there, yeah.
And it's
which I'm sure has beat the budget.
Yeah, probably so.
The fly flew right in the camera.
This is great because hopefully you'll see that on TikTok at some point. But so yeah, it came out October 27th, and I wasn't disinterested or like opposed. It just was kind of like when I get to it type of thing. But I saw it and it just kind of struck me. I said, okay, let's do it. So
my reason for wanting to see it was Paul Giamatti, who's been in over 100 films.
No, he is
not.
He's
over 100. 118 to be precise.
No way on earth.
Yeah, and here's a couple.
Way has he been in 100?
Cinderella Man.
I got to look this up.
Yeah, look it up. Cinderella Man. I'll name
actually.
Some.
Okay, so
The Illusionist.
118. Is that what you said?
I said 118.
Okay, anybody can look it up on IMDb. So
I know, but I didn't just look it up.
But let's not run down his whole resume.
No,
let's get right into it. So. Again, stars Paul Giamatti. It was directed by Alexander Payne. Now, they haven't worked together for about 20 years.
Since Sideways.
Thanks for finishing.
I saw you about to say it.
I know, but I don't need you
I'm going to
get
it in.
It's such a nightmare for the editing. And Jesus. Okay.
What am I supposed to do? Just sit here?
Just like give me a minute to get it out. Okay. So anyways, they worked together on Sideways.
Yes.
Right. Which we both, and I haven't seen Sideways probably since it came out in 2004.
Yeah, I've seen it within the last 5 years.
Now, Paul Giamatti, I first, came to know him from, of course, Howard Stern's Private Parts, which
Right.
is where a lot of people were introduced to him when he played, is it Henry Rushton? Or, I can't think of the guy's
You
name,
should
but
know that
but
name.
Pig Vomit, as he was
Right,
known,
on the
which was
Howard
what
Stern show.
which was the executive at NBC that Stern was working for at the time, but so that he really kind of broke out after that and then started getting all these kind of smaller roles and then eventually get Sideways with Alexander Payne. And Payne doesn't do a lot. I mean, his resume, he's very selective about the
Right.
films he does.
But you know what? I think of him as a guy that makes great movies for people like me. And Nebraska, you probably haven't
Nebraska,
seen.
yeah, sure.
Have you seen it?
With
I always think of dad when I see that one.
right.
The Descendants.
Will Forte and the star, what's the
Yeah, right. Will it's another Will Arnett, right?
no, 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 no. The older guy, the older actor that's in it. Jesus, plays his
I
father,
forget.
right? Plays his father in it. How can you forget that?
Because I haven't watched in a while.
Jesus.
Oh, you're saying Bruce Dern.
Bruce Dern, thank you. Because
Oh,
I was thinking of
I'm thinking
Laura.
of Bruce Dern's father.
No, I said Will Forte.
Right.
And then okay, so
And wasn't Will
anyways,
Arnett the other son?
I don't recall. You might be right. I have to look it up, but that's
And
irrelevant. So go
the
ahead.
movie Descendants, you probably haven't
I
seen
haven't
with
seen
George
Descendants.
Clooney,
No,
is
no.
really funny.
Yeah.
Um, I remember dad thought that was, like, great. Election with
Yeah. So
Reese Witherspoon,
right, Matthew Broderick.
Matthew Broadway Broderick. Um,
Broadway. He
I
is
know,
on
well,
Broadway
he is
quite
a
a bit
Broadway guy.
with the producers. Yeah.
Downsizing with Matt Damon. Yeah, I liked it. I just thought it was a clever
Yeah.
idea. It
But
wasn't
it
that great a
tanked.
movie,
It
but
tanked.
oh,
Yeah.
it tanked and it deserved to.
Well, he talked about Alexander Payne talked about they might have spent a little too much time on the the screenplay for that one. And
You
all right, so let's talk more. Not just Paul Giamatti, but the two other major players in this
yeah,
film are Dominic Sessa and Davine Joy Randolph. Who I don't. Were you familiar with Davine's work? I
no,
wasn't. Okay,
no,
but they're the three main
correct.
stars of the film. Paul Giamatti plays Paul Hunman, who's this kind of how
He's
would you
a
describe him?
teacher, a teacher.
Yeah, but how would you describe his personality? He's kind of somewhat curmudgeonly,
Yeah,
and
very sophisticated to the point where he has to show off his
mm, is
intelligence,
he though? I mean, he is
unlike
to
somebody that has a law degree and a PhD
he is
and
to a
would
s-
bring that up.
he. That's good. That's good. That's Michael Smith Esquire, folks. Crowbar that in anytime you can. Dominic Sessa plays Angus Tully, who's one of the students at the boarding school,
First
and
movie,
and
first
Davine,
film.
can you just please not try to
I'm
get out
adding
all your
color.
fucking notes in the first 5 minutes of the podcast?
It's color.
Relax. I'm setting you up. I set it up, and then okay, so I'll give you the lobby, the volley, and then you can. Mike, it hasn't been. It's in Little League and the Pirates, but anyways,
An
and
all-star that year.
and Davine Joy Randolph plays Mary Lamb, which is a great character's name. Oh,
You
that's
got it, you got it on film.
that is that
He
gets
was,
one
like,
of
right
these.
in my face.
That gets one of those. No, he
He was
landed
like
on your face.
yeah, he was like he's like,
Now,
"You're not gonna talk
that's
shit
a
about
great
me."
tie into Giamatti's character. One of his characteristics is that he suffers from this condition where some people call it
A
like
lazy eye.
no, no that too, but
Yeah.
the smell, his body odor.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it's like it's a little fishy, a little gamey.
Right.
But
And there's a name for it,
made
which
me
I
think
forget.
perhaps you haven't bathed in a while. You got a fucking flies landing
Yeah,
on your face.
and I killed
Please,
one in my room last
please
night.
cut
This is
that.
it's winter.
There's a long list of cast, but that's the three primary
Yeah.
players in the film. So
Yeah.
we may make comments about some of the others, but and then we mentioned, of course, directed by Alexander Payne, written by David Hemmingson, and I want to mention the cinematographer Eigil Brauld,
Mhm.
who had never heard of before, with just a spectacular job in this film. Rated R, runtime of 133 minutes, which didn't feel like that to me.
No, it
Watching it,
was
it didn't feel long to me,
no, it was just right, I
if you
thought.
consider that long. So I wanna jump right into this. I'm gonna hand it over to you, but I was pretty much hooked from the title sequence
Me too.
because, you know, a couple of things I wanna mention, and I'm sure you've got a lot of notes on this too, but growing up in New England in the '70s, um, it's very difficult to capture that on film, and
It's
very
1969.
no, it's 1970, it turns
It turns
1971.
1970. Oh, is it
No,
71? I thought it was
no,
70.
it's
Okay.
1970, turns 1971. But yes, set in 1970. And right from the jump, the title sequence, I was intrigued because they created all of these like focus features.
Right.
And was it Miramax? I think was the other film company involved, the other studio, and they had these old vintage '70s looking
Right,
titles.
I'm like, "This said 4K. This is not 4K."
It was very
All the pops
grainy.
and snaps and
Yeah, the little wiggly lines and
right,
everything, it was very
right.
grainy, yeah, but I love that, and I'm a sucker for that, again, because of the nostalgic aspect of it for me and for you, I think, but it also, it made me think back to films, and we talked about one of these not that long ago on the podcast, but films like Ordinary People,
Yeah.
Kramer versus Kramer, you can name 1,000 others, but a character-driven film,
Oh,
right?
definitely.
Not like some of these shows and movies we've talked about recently where there's so many friggin' characters you gotta keep track of and what universe am I in and all. It was
Right.
so refreshing
Yeah.
to just
It's just a
see
straightforward
just a straightforward,
story.
character-driven, great writing,
Yeah.
wonderful directing, the
And
cinematography,
fantastic acting.
great acting, the score was wonderful, everything about it was great, and we
Did you notice
said
Cat Stevens came out?
I did, The Wind.
Right,
That's
and
right.
it's not a song that you really think of when you think of Cat Stevens,
Yeah,
but I had
great
just
song.
recently said to you, "I'm
Yeah,
hooked on Cat Stevens, I don't know why.
right.
I'm playing his music,"
It's
and
so good, so
so
good.
to hear him, it was like, "That's weird."
Right. So
So
all of that stuff mixed in, I was just kind of riveted, and again, it was so nice to just kind of enjoy this, like you said, this real straightforward story about these 3 main characters. Now, I will say, we talked about, when we were talking about Fargo on a recent episode,
mhm,
we said this is almost a perfect movie.
yeah,
And there were some very minor things that we were pointing out in that episode about it that maybe, have it fall just shy of that. Holdovers to me is one of these perfect movies.
yeah, it's
It's
really
it's
good.
almost flawless. It's
Yeah,
that good from everything
yeah,
that we just mentioned, the acting on down. You mentioned Dominic Sessa, who, of course, as
mhm,
you said, this is his first film, hadn't even done a short film or anything,
right.
was a student at one of the schools they were filming at.
Oh, wow. I
Turns
didn't know
like
that.
turns 19 or 20 just before they start filming.
Yeah.
So he's got no experience whatsoever in front of the camera.
No, but for some reason, although he's I wouldn't call him a bully, he was instantly likable to me. I don't know why. He seems like an overachiever that's underachieving,
Mhm,
if that makes any sense. Like he's a smart kid. It almost opens with Giamatti giving out grades
mhm.
and everybody's getting Fs and Ds and
And he
F
gets a B
minus.
plus.
He gets a B plus.
Right, so and you know that's significant in the context of what you just said, which is Giamatti, as this
Right.
Professor Hunnam is not giving out these grades very easily. But I think it's safe to say we're gonna be hearing a lot more about Dominic Sessa. But yeah, his performance was just really fantastic in
And
it.
there was a lot of layers to it. It was a
A
very
lot of layers, yeah.
complex.
There's a lot of parallels here too with Giamatti's background and Hemmingson, the writer, as far as their experiences at these private boarding school
Ivy
type.
League schools.
Yeah. And, I had to go back and do a little bit of homework on Giamatti, who, I've liked for many, many years, like you mentioned too. I loved him in John Adams, the series on
I was
HBO.
gonna ask you if you'd seen that.
Oh yeah, I loved him in John Adams.
Fantastic performance.
So good in that. If you haven't seen John Adams, check that out.
American Splendor is another one.
American Splendor, that's right.
Awesome.
That's right. And, but, his, father,
Mhm.
Bart Giamatti, of course, a lot of people would know him, although his tenure was very short-lived, the shortest in Major League history. He was the commissioner for Major League Baseball. Did you remember that?
I don't.
Bart Giamatti, the name doesn't ring a
See, the
bell?
name does ring a bell.
Right. He was 51 years old, died of a heart attack.
Ugh,
And so he only served for like 7 months as the commissioner.
wow.
But he was at least 8 years, I think, maybe 10, he was the president of Yale University.
Huh,
And
interesting.
and of course, Giamatti studied there as
Right,
well.
right.
Just got an honorary doctorate from there actually, but he got his undergrad and I think an MFA from Yale, I believe is
Yeah,
where he was
yeah.
educated. His birthday, same as our father's birthday, which is
Oh, wow.
interesting. Yeah,
June.
in June, yeah, early June. So, but experience his father was born in Boston.
Mhm.
I think he was
Didn't
grew up in Connecticut, I believe is where
Yeah,
Giamatti
didn't you
grew up.
think it was fascinating how they you see actors being de-aged, how they de-aged Boston?
Not entirely, no. Now, there's
Well,
this
they show, 93 and there's no bridge.
correct, and just the skyline is so different now, and
Right.
that could have been stock footage from the
It
past,
must have been.
you
It
know what I
had
mean?
to be.
But then
But
there's
there was a scene where they're walking out of Faneuil Hall, and
correct,
it's all totally different.
right, but I think the rest of it, for the most part, is pretty much because Alexander Payne, I had listened to an interview with him on a podcast, and he talked about he was quoted as saying in fact, this was a cool thing for those who haven't seen it, you can see it on Peacock as I did.
Right.
There's like 5 or 6 featurettes, very short, but these little
Yeah.
featurettes, and one of them is Alexander Payne talking about how, change comes very slow to New England.
Right.
And so it wasn't all that difficult for them to find some of these locations when they were scouting that would appear to not have changed a hell of a lot since
Right.
1970.
And as you know, as a kid, I used to go into Boston almost daily. I'd get home from school, meet a friend of mine at the bus stop. We'd go to the, um, what is it, MTA, right? The Mass Transit Authority on the Orange Line and take it right into downtown Boston. And
Mhm.
we used to do things like I was into magic at the time. And there was this dollar bill snatcher where
Yes.
you would put a dollar bill on this
Mhm.
long wire, and me and my friend would lay a dollar bill down, and then the wire's like 15 feet long. So as soon as somebody bent over to pick it up, you hit a button and it pulls the dollar to you. If
Right.
we did that today, we'd probably get shot.
That's a classic bit. It's a classic bit. Yeah, so that was a really the production design, the locations, were really, again, I
Yeah,
think, growing up there, again, it
yeah.
just resonates. The other thing too, Paul Giamatti's, I believe it's his maternal great-grandparents are from Wakefield.
Oh, really?
And if you notice, there's a scene in the film where they're playing candlepin bowling. You must have loved that.
Of
It
course.
was in a bowling alley in Wakefield.
Right,
You
and then
see it right on the thing.
there's 2 guys talking about these 10-pin people. They come in, a candlepin is much harder game, and then Giamatti takes issue to that for whatever because he's a 10-pin guy. You can
Yeah.
tell by the way he
And
rolls it.
there's this guy, like, that's half in the bag dressed as Santa Claus
Right, and
at
what
the
he
bar.
says he starts telling him how inaccurate the
Right. Well,
Santa
actually
Claus.
right, because he teaches the classics,
Right,
which,
like
his dad, I think, was a professor of
antiquities.
yeah, ancient well, I'm just talking about his father
Oh,
in
okay.
real life, like, taught like literature or something,
Right.
Italian literature or something like that. I forget, but so yeah, the set, the look and the feel of it, because we've talked about that too. I think back to when we did a review on the Ben Affleck film, The Tender Bar.
Mhm.
There's some attempts that are made by filmmakers to try to capture that kind of New England feel,
And
and
that
it
one
just
didn't.
no. I'm like, you sure this isn't based in New York? Because it really
Right.
felt like it was.
They all spoke with a New York accent, even Ben.
Right, it was really
It was
odd.
weird.
And you know what I like, speaking of the accent, is Dominic Sessa does one of these things where he really doesn't force that, right?
Mhm.
It's just, he's just speaking. He's
Slips
not
in once, so
a
kinda like
little
me.
a little bit, yeah, and Giamatti doesn't really go heavy on it. It's
No.
very understated in the film, other than I would say the ancillary characters that are in the film.
Right.
There's some that have a very thick
Yeah.
accent, but
Probably local talent.
it was pretty well done. Oh, I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was a lot of local talent, yeah.
So, do we set up the story?
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so the movie's called The
I
Holdovers.
just I just wanted to mention that because or some of those things because of all the parallels between like, Giamatti's life, the writer's life,
Right.
and what the film is about, so
And where it's located made a,
and where it's located, yeah.
you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
difference for us. But
right.
so anyways, it's called The Holdovers, and that name comes from they're at a boarding school. Okay. And all these kids, and if for anyone who's been to boarding school and knows about boarding school, it's almost like going to college at a younger age. You live there, they have dorms, you eat together every meal, you do everything together. And then when a break comes, like in this case, Christmas break, most of these kids, and they come from well off families, it's not cheap to send your kid to any boarding school, never mind a good one.
Hey, your
So,
buddy's back.
you saw him.
Yeah.
It's driving me so nuts.
Can we cut to a quick scene from the movie The Fly? Just gratuitous. I wanna see some Jeff,
Be one of the old ones where he's got a big fly mask, one of the, Vincent
yeah,
Price
Jeff Goldblum,
movies.
please, a little quick clip. Alright, go ahead.
But anyway, so Christmas vacation comes, and most of the kids go off with their families, they go on vacation, and in this one, there's 4 kids that, for whatever reason, their family just leaves them there. So somebody, a faculty member, has to stay behind
Right,
to watch over these holdovers,
and that's Giamatti.
and that's Giamatti, and that's the
Right.
basic premise of the story, and
Right.
it winds up being 1.
Right, because, 3 or 4 of the others are able to get that thing looks like a pterodactyl.
It's
can you do
it
some, can you call in, like, a pest company at
I
some
told
point?
you,
I mean,
it's
it's
winter.
ridiculous.
We don't have flies. It's sitting right on my other light over here.
Maybe check the pits,
I'm
possibly?
telling you, it's not me. I don't have the Chiamati disease.
Yeah, well, if this keeps up, we're gonna have to pause and get rid of that frigging thing,
Yeah.
but
So
yeah, so a few of them, get their ticket out of there, and there's this one character who, his father again, these affluent families, his
yes.
father choppers in,
Yes.
comes in with a helicopter on the school property,
Yeah.
and they all get clearance from their parents to come
To go.
home. They get
Go on
on
a
the
ski
chopper
trip.
and they go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of them, but not all of them. Some of them are just
Right.
going back to their homes.
Yeah.
So it leaves behind Dominic Sessa's character, Tully,
Right.
Giamatti, and Davine Joy Randolph's character, Mary
The
Lamb, who's
cook.
the head cook at the
Yeah.
school. And there's a storyline with her character. Her son had gone off because again, this is during Vietnam.
Mhm.
Okay, so her son goes off to Vietnam and is killed like so many others.
Right. 20
Um,
years old.
and I felt like, we talked about this with Killers of the Flower Moon and Lily
Mhm.
Gladstone's
Mhm.
character. I felt the same with Davine Joy Randolph that they did not allow her storyline to be fleshed out as much as I think it could have been. Sh
I thought it was pretty good. I mean, she won the Golden Globe.
well, deservedly so.
Yeah.
Deservedly so, but I wanted to I wanted them to delve just a little bit deeper
Well,
into her character
I
story.
thought they did enough. Like, there was also, like, a
Mm,
janitor
it's a
that
little
stayed
imbalanced.
behind,
Yeah.
and it seemed like he was trying his best to maybe flirt with her a little bit
Oh, I think
or
he
at
had the
least
hots for Mary, yeah.
right, and
It was a sweet
right, until he touched
dynamic.
her or, like, at one point, she's crying in the kitchen, and, Dominic runs to get Giamatti and says, "Hurry up, there's an emergency," and they go in, and she's bawling, and she's crying about because she lost her husband too at a young age.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, but she lost her son at this time of year,
right, so
and it's
she's
bringing up all of these
crying,
feelings,
and the janitor, and I forget his name,
but it has nothing to
Danny, I should have
thanks, dude.
easily known that,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
He puts his hand on her shoulder to try to comfort her,
Okay.
and she has this very, negative response, and
Yeah.
Giamatti touches her at one point and again, and he's like,
You're
"Okay."
I think you're reading into that too
I
much.
don't think so.
No, there's nothing to do with that. That's just I think that she wanted to deal with this in her own way. She didn't want any help.
By
She she
herself.
didn't want any sympathy. She didn't want right, exactly. So
Yeah,
when when they're just trying to reach out to console her, as you said, she responds in this kind of visceral way. But
right.
I think you're implying something very different, which I think has nothing to do with it whatsoever.
I don't know.
No, there's no way because that was not paid off in any way, shape, or form, and I don't believe Alexander Payne or, the writer would have left that on the table in that way.
yeah.
So but
Well,
anyways, that's not really I just wanna make the point, I think she could have been given just a little bit more screen time.
yeah,
There's a whole segment where they go into Boston.
right. Tully,
Tully convinces, the Giamatti's character to go into Boston because that's where he's from. His father's living there. We can get to
yes,
that in a minute. And so they all go in, and then, Davine Joy Randolph's character, very good performance, as we said.
yes,
She's going to visit her sister in Roxbury.
correct.
So that's all
And
we
it's one of those houses, and you probably laughed when you saw it because I know people who grew up in those
Oh,
houses that are,
yeah.
they just the
5
stairs
stories high,
yeah,
that
and
wooden
they live on the
stairway.
top. Yeah,
So dangerous, yeah.
but,
But, so go ahead and talk a little bit about that piece.
which, the trip into Boston?
Yeah,
Well, it becomes
and the
a
father, the relationship between Dominic, Sessa's
right,
character, Tully,
right.
and his
He's
father.
often talking about his
S
dad, and he's
spoiler
very
alert.
yeah, I'm not gonna give away the main thing, but I will say he has
Yeah,
this relationship with his dad,
mhm,
at least spiritually, right? Because at one point he says, "My dad's dead." I
mhm.
think he says it to Giamatti, and then he tries to sneak away. They go to a movie, and Angus is his first name. He leaves the theater. He said he's always going to the bathroom. You
Did
notice
they
that? I got to go to the
did they
bathroom.
go to a movie? What the hell were they
They
seeing?
did.
I
They were
don't
at a
remember.
movie, and
Oh, okay,
and uh
forgot.
and Giamatti says something, and somebody says, "Shh." He's like, "Shut the up." There was a
I don't
lot of
remember that.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's funny.
okay.
So he sneaks out, and he gets in a cab, and then, Giamatti kinda sits
He
there for a
stops
second.
him. He stops him.
He gets there, and he stops the cab, and he says, "Get out, you liar. You planned this the whole time. You were gonna do this, and where are you going? Just tell me, I'll go with you." And he says, "I'm going to see my dad." And I think Giamatti, and he gets cut off, starts to say, "Your dad's," and then it's just cut off to them
No,
going,
no, 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 it's not. No, no, no.
yeah, maybe I remember.
Let me clarify that just a
Yeah, go
hair. Yeah.
ahead.
He says, um, "Do you wanna come or something like that with me?"
Yes. He said,
And
"You can even come with me."
it's something like that, and
Yeah.
Giamatti's character says, of course we can go visit the cemetery."
Exactly,
And that's what he
exactly.
says, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And then it goes on from there.
And then it goes on from there, and also early in the movie, very early in the movie, he pulls out a picture of him with his parents,
Mhm,
and you can tell it's a while, because he's like a young
mhm,
boy at that point,
right.
and one of the other kids steals the photo, and they're all stealing stuff from each other and the hijinks that go on in a when you're in a living space together.
Yeah, well, and Tully's got this reputation where he's been already booted out of like 4 boarding schools.
Yeah, and he's afraid, and he even says to Giamatti, "I'm gonna get booted out of here. I'm gonna deserve it,
And they're gonna send me to military
and then I'm
school,
going to
and
military
then I'm going
school."
to
And
Vietnam,
right,
and then I'm
and
gonna get
he
killed.
doesn't say that. He just says, "And then you know what's next."
Exactly, right,
And we
right,
all know.
right.
But, just a fantastic performance. The 2 of them, because they start to be very honest with each other.
Yeah,
Like Tully says, "You know, everybody hates you."
yeah.
He hears that several times
There's
through
a
the
monologue. There's
movie.
there's one scene in particular where they're in a restaurant together in Boston still on
Yes,
this trip, and Giamatti, who's very much a rule follower, at least in his
very much a Barton
in
man.
his role as a professor, is or an adjunct professor, we could maybe point out. He says, okay, well, the field trip, like it's under the guise of it fits into the rules of
Right,
this
because
holdover situation, right? They can go on a field trip.
it's in the
And there's a
pamphlet or the
budget
book.
for it and everything, right? So they're having dinner,
Mhm.
and it's this really intimate scene between Giamatti and Sessa, and it opens with a close up on Sessa, and he's
Mhm.
given this great monologue about his relationship with his father,
Yeah.
and it's slowly, the camera's kind of panning out, zooming out,
Mhm.
and then Giamatti is trying to kind of console him and say, you're not your
You're not your
father.
father.
No,
Right, right.
I'm not my father, and et cetera. And they have all this back and forth. But there's this whole thing you mentioned that it's a Barton men don't lie, and
Right.
Barton, of course, is the name of the school that
Mhm.
they're at. But I thought what was interesting is there's a scene where Tully
Mhm.
lies to protect
Him.
Hunnam.
Hunnam
But then there's a scene where Hunnam lies
to
really to
protect
protect
Tully.
himself. Now, more to protect
You
himself.
think so?
Yeah, he's confronted by a
The
former
dean,
no, no, no.
headmaster.
No, 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 no,
Oh,
no.
wait, what's your
I'm
a
talking about
different
this.
lie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's confronted by an old classmate that they went to Harvard together.
Oh, yes, yes.
And, Giamatti tells this whole lie about, oh,
Which
yeah.
he's fed it by Tully.
Yes, you're right. You're right about writing a book. He's writing a
Correct.
novel.
Oh, yeah,
But
he's got
that
a
wasn't
book.
the main lie. He starts off with his own lie saying,
Correct.
"Oh," he's like, his buddy is like, "Oh, where are you teaching now? Where'd you end up?" And he's like, "Oh,
Right.
abroad, mostly, different prestigious institutions," whatever he says.
Yeah.
And then Tully steps in and says, he's also writing a novel,
Why don't you tell him about it?
and
It's
he
n and he
keeps,
gives him the title
"What's the
and
name of it?" And he keeps doing all of this, but Giamatti, that whole lie was just about him saving face for himself. It had
yes,
nothing to
yes,
do with
because he
Tully.
was embarrassed, and what we hear is the guy says, "Well, great, I'm
Well, keep
so
an eye out for your
glad."
book.
Right, "And I'm so glad you landed on your feet."
Right. So then
And
cut
that's
to
what
cut
sets
to
off Tully
a scene between Tully and Hunnam where he basically learns that he got booted out of school.
at Harvard.
There was an incident at Harvard. He get booted out. He gets hired at Barton as an
I
adjunct.
liked him, yeah, and he didn't
He's
have a
n
degree.
he exactly. So that there was a big reveal there about his
Right.
character at that point, which I think just endears them to each other even more. And
I
it's this
think
whole
so.
thing of entre nous,
Yeah,
right? Like just between us,
between us, we'll keep it
they
quiet.
kept repeating that. Yeah.
Be
So as you said, they really formed this tight bond as it went on.
you know, we'll wrap it up here, but I wanted to point out
You can
just
wrap it up. I still got more to say.
oh, well, I
We'll
wanted to
wrap it
point
up
out
here.
I wanted
I
so
like Barton.
much at the ending for Giamatti to buy him a Miller Lite because that comes up so many times. It's the
It's the
champagne of
champagne of
beers.
beers.
But the ending, and I'm not gonna say what it is so pitch perfect. Like, I wanted it to end with them having a Miller together,
Mhm.
a Miller Lite together, but it ends in a different
It's
way,
great.
equally as funny,
It's a good reveal.
probably better than,
And let's
what I
just
had.
say he didn't have a great relationship with the headmaster
No.
at the boarding school.
What did he
But
call him? He had a name for him,
he said
"You."
something like he's the human form of penis cancer,
Yeah,
is what he said at one point. That was being kind.
yeah.
But, I want to mention too, God, I almost didn't recognize Tate Donovan in this, who
Right.
plays his
The beard.
stepfather.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm like,
there's a
"Hey, who
scene
is that?"
there's a
Yeah.
scene when he and Tully's mother show up
Yes.
at the school when they discover that they ran off to Boston and this whole thing.
Right, right.
And I didn't even recognize Tate when he got out of the car, I had no
I
idea,
didn't
but
either until he sat down and started talking, that's
yeah.
when.
There's some great music in this film. You mentioned Cat Stevens, Damian Jurado is another one who's got a couple of songs on the soundtrack.
Mhm,
Instantly too, all of the things, some of the stuff we mentioned at the top, where within the first couple of minutes, Tully's in his room at Barton, and
mhm.
immediately there's a Boston Bruins banner
Yeah,
on the wall, and just all this stuff that kind of pulled me in immediately. But the way that they graded the film in post production, all the things they did to the look of it, whatever lenses they use, and all of the
mhm.
tricks and things that they did to give it that vintage look. Man, did they hit a
Yeah, they
home run
nailed
with
it,
it. I
yeah.
thought it was really good.
And like you said, the opening sequence, I just had a smile on my face for
Me
some
too.
reason, it was
Yeah.
just like, "This is gonna be good."
And you mentioned Giamatti's character as a lazy eye, and apparently neither he nor Alexander Payne have fessed up to as to how they did that, how they achieved that.
No, I know,
So I don't
because
know.
his eye would sometimes go up.
Which ironically, or interestingly enough, that comes into play in a very dramatic way, I felt, towards the end
Yes.
of the film.
Yes, there's a
There's a
very
very
emotional
moving,
beat,
yeah, very emotional beat.
and there was a lot of those throughout. There was a lot
Yeah,
of these emotional, heavy beats, and I was thinking it was gonna be more humor, to be honest, where I
and there
wouldn't
was
call this a comedy.
no, but it's a comedy drama. There's definitely
Right.
enough, it's very much like it gives me Good Will Hunting vibes. There's some
Yeah,
Good Will Hunting
where
vibes,
there's
and
really serious.
which is my number 1 film of all time,
Yeah.
and, yeah, but, we said at the top, the character development, I felt very invested in the film from the beginning, and it's interesting too, this is the point I was trying to think of is,
Mhm.
when I mentioned Good Will Hunting was also I was afraid at the beginning, and for a little bit, maybe the first third of the film, I'm like, am I gonna make too many comparisons to Dead Poet Society with the great, speaking of Good Will Hunting, with Robin
Yeah,
Williams, who
Robin
won the
Williams,
Oscar for that, of
correct.
course. But it didn't,
No,
that went away very, very
it was a
quickly.
I
But
would call it a
you could
very
easily
unique.
make comparisons though.
Oh, you can, but I think this is unique in its
It
own
stands on
way.
its own. It
Yeah,
stands on its own, yeah.
and I
So,
don't wanna say any more about it because I don't wanna give it.
no,
I want
clearly
people to,
though,
like, find it
yeah, I
and watch
highly
it.
recommend this film.
Yeah.
Wherever you can get it. It's a film I'll certainly return to. It's
Yeah,
a film I'll watch again.
right,
And it's a film that, I've got such superhero fatigue, such multiverse fatigue,
right.
such all of that fatigue that
This was
this was just
perfect.
a breath of fresh air. So hats
Now,
off to.
we opened this talking about awards.
Mhm.
Cillian Murphy or Paul Giamatti?
Okay, now I'm so glad you brought that up because I have to go back and watch Oppenheimer now again, but
Mhm.
after I finished watching it, I thought, "Okay, wait a second, I think Giamatti now is the front runner."
And he beat out Cillian for the Golden Globe, which was a shock to everybody.
And I see why
Me
though.
too.
And you don't Killian's already coming into it with the gravitas of this character that he's playing, this real life character,
Right,
and not that there isn't some of that here because this is an amalgam of a lot of
right,
different people that the writer and, whatever,
right.
took inspiration from, but, I would not I could easily see him taking home the
I
Oscar for
said to
this.
you, we were having a conversation, I don't know why we were talking about Best Actor, but I said, "You got Cillian Murphy and Leonardo doesn't get nominated. And I'm railing because I think it was his best performance. So, and then we were like, who's going to win? Well, Cillian. And then I said, I don't know. Paul Giamatti could throw a monkey wrench into this.
And now I know you're right. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
So,
And actually, didn't you just see it or you had already seen it?
no, I just saw it. I was
Okay.
gonna buy it on right now. It's on sale for $17.99 on Blu-ray, but it's coming out on 4K. So I'm
And
waiting.
I would wait. Yeah. And
Yeah,
especially give me, digital code. But
right.
um
And the
yeah, it's
Blu-ray
worth
has a digital code.
this is
So
worth seeing in the theater. I mean, this is a movie that I would hope people would get out to go to the theater to see. But however you can get your hands on it, make sure that you check this film out. So it's The Holdovers from director Alexander Payne, who again is very selective
great,
about what he does.
yeah, but a great
Um,
resume.
yeah, David Hemmingson, again, the writer here, Paul Giamatti, Dominic Sessa. I can't wait to see more from him.
Yeah.
And Davine Joy Randolph did a really nice job in this film as well. So, um, yeah, thoroughly enjoyed this film. It's one of my, I will have to say it's one of my favorite films of 2023 for
Oh,
sure.
definitely. Yeah.
It's up there in the top 5.
Top 5. Yeah.
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 Well, there you go, folks. It's going to do it for another episode of the O Brother podcast. Oh, I have the 15-ounce mug back in my.
Okay.
You
So
can
you have
see.
a new mug.
I got. Well,
Wow.
this isn't it. This is the.
I know.
Yeah, but I haven't.
This
I
is
do have another one that'll be premiered on the show in the next, I don't know, few weeks or
Yeah,
something.
meet the
You'll
new
see it.
mug, same as the
Same
old
as
mug.
mug. But for those of you that are not currently following us, please make sure that you do go out to our official website, ohb as in brother podcast.com. You can get access there to, all of the social media channels, our YouTube channel. If you would go out and subscribe to the YouTube channel, like our videos, it really does help push the show out to more and more people. We appreciate all the support we've gotten thus far, and a lot of people that have followed us out there. You can follow us on Instagram, TikTok, all the social media platforms, and we're on every audio podcast platform you can think of. So if you like to also consume your podcast that way, we're there. The one and
If you're
only O Brother podcast.
if you're sitting in traffic,
There you go.
why not listen to us?
That's it. All right, that's going to do it for another episode of the O Brother podcast. I've been your host, Dan Smith. Alongside me, as always, my brother from the same mother, Mike Smith, and we will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.